In the small village of Dimbasa, where the red earth blended with the vibrant green of the vegetation, three sisters faced the beginning of another day. Afua, the eldest at 11, watched the horizon cautiously as she prepared breakfast for her younger sisters. Adjoa, 6, played silently with her rag doll, while little Aqua, only 1 year old, babbled in her improvised crib. The hut they called home was quiet, starkly different from the days when their mother, Abena, filled the air with songs and laughter. But Abena was no longer there, and the silence was a constant reminder of her absence. Afua sighed as she remembered the night when everything changed. The sound of raised voices, the thud of a body falling, and then silence. The next morning, their father Kwame coldly announced that Abena had left, but Afua knew the truth. She had seen the blood, heard the neighbors' whispers. Her mother hadn't just left, she had been taken from them. Since then, Kwame had become a stranger in his own home, spending most of his time away, drowning his guilt in palm wine. And the girls were left in the care of Amma, Kwame's new wife, a woman whose eyes shone with barely concealed cruelty. "Efua!" Amma's shrill voice cut through the morning air. "Where is my coffee?" Afua hurried, pouring some of the hot liquid into a mug. She knew that if she delayed, there would be consequences. The marks on her back were a constant reminder of Amma's impatience. As she handed over the coffee, Afua overheard a snippet of conversation coming from the main room. "Get rid of them," Amma's voice whispered urgently. "Especially the eldest. She knows too much." Afua's heart froze. She had already suspected they weren't welcome, but hearing the confirmation was terrifying. At that moment, she knew they had to flee. It was no longer a question of if, but of when. That night, after Amma and Kwame had fallen asleep, Afua woke her sisters. With silent movements born of fear and necessity, she gathered what little they could carry: a few pieces of bread, a gourd with water, and their mother's favorite shawl. "Ajoa," she whispered, gently shaking her sister. "Wake up. We have to go." Ajoa opened her eyes, confused. "Go where, Afua?" "Away from here. It's not safe anymore." With Aqua securely tied to her back and Ajoa holding her hand, Afua led her sisters out of the hut. The night was dark, the new moon offering little light to guide them. But Afua knew every inch of Dimbasa. She led them through narrow alleys and little-used paths, avoiding the more illuminated parts of the village. When they finally reached the edge of the forest that surrounded Dimbasa, Afua paused for a moment. She looked back at the only home they had ever known. For a moment, doubt assailed her. Were they doing the right thing? But then she remembered Amma's words, the veiled threat in her voice, and knew they had no choice. "Let's go," she said softly, pulling Adjoa into the darkness of the forest. The first hours of their journey were the hardest. The forest was dense, the nighttime sounds frightening for children, accustomed only to the familiar noises of the village. Adjoa stumbled often, exhausted and scared. Aqua, feeling the tension, began to cry softly. "Shh, little one," Afua murmured, gently rocking her youngest sister. "We have to be as quiet as shadows." They walked for hours, guided only by Afua's determination and survival instinct. When the first ray of sunlight began to penetrate through the trees, Afua decided it was time to rest. They found a small space between two large trees, protected by dense bushes. Afua carefully laid Aqua down on the soft, leaf-covered ground and helped Adjoa settle in. "Try to sleep a little," she told her middle sister. "I'll keep watch." But even as she said this, Afua felt the weight of exhaustion in her own eyes. She fought against sleep, determined to protect her sisters, but eventually succumbed to fatigue. When Afua woke up, the sun was already high in the sky. She stood up in a panic, fearing she had slept too long. But her sisters were still there, Adjoa playing quietly with some leaves while Aqua slept. I was so scared, Adjoa whispered when she saw Afua awake. I thought you had gone too. Like Mama. Afua's heart tightened at her sister's words. Never, Adjoa, she promised, hugging her tightly. I will never leave you. They shared the little food they had brought and drank from the gourd. Afua knew they needed to find more supplies soon, but for now it had to be enough. They continued their journey, Afua trying to keep a steady course east, where she believed they would find the next village, but the forest seemed endless, each tree identical to the last. On the third day of their escape, the food ran out. The water was almost gone, and Akua cried constantly, hungry and uncomfortable. Afua felt desperation growing in her chest. Had she condemned her sisters to a fate worse than what awaited them in Dimbasa? It was then that they heard a distant sound, almost imperceptible at first, but growing clearer as they advanced. The sound of running water. With renewed energy from hope, they hurried toward the sound. After a few minutes of walking, they reached the bank of a clear stream. Adjoa shouted with joy, running into the water. Afua followed more cautiously, first testing the water before allowing her sister to drink. She filled the gourd, gave water to Akua, and finally quenched her own thirst. For the first time in days, Afua felt a glimmer of optimism. With water, they could survive longer. Maybe they could even find some fruits or edible roots along the stream. They decided to follow the course of the water, hoping it would lead them to some inhabited place. As they walked, Afua began to notice encouraging signs. Footprints in the soft mud near the shore, branches broken in a way that suggested people had passed. On the fifth day of their journey, as the sun was beginning to set, they heard voices. Afua immediately pulled her sisters behind a bush, her heart racing. Were they people from Dimbasa, sent to search for them, or strangers who might help them? Cautiously, Afua peered through the leaves. She saw a group of people setting up camp near the stream. Their clothes were colorful and unlike anything she had ever seen in Dimbasa. And there was music, the soft sound of a stringed instrument floating in the night air. Gypsies, Afua whispered, remembering the stories her mother used to tell about the nomadic people who traveled through the region. Adjoa looked at her older sister, her eyes wide with fear and curiosity. Are they dangerous? She asked. Afua hesitated. She didn't know much about the gypsies, other than the stories she had heard. Some people in Dimbasa spoke of them with suspicion, but her mother always described them as a free and kind people. I don't know, she answered honestly, but we need help, Adjoa. We can't continue alone in the forest. Taking a deep breath to gather courage, Afua picked up Akua in her arms and, holding Adjoa's hand, emerged from their hiding place. As they approached the camp, conversations died down. All eyes turned to the three dirty and exhausted girls emerging from the forest. An elderly woman, with gray hair braided with colorful ribbons, stood up and walked towards them. Her face was marked by deep wrinkles, but her eyes were kind. Welcome, children, she said, her voice soft and welcoming. I am Amara. It looks like you've had a long journey. Afua, feeling the tears she had held back for days finally overflow, just nodded. Amara led them to the fire, where she offered them food and fresh water. While the girls ate eagerly, the elder observed them with keen eyes. You ran away from somewhere, didn't you? She asked gently. Afua hesitated, but something in Amara's voice made her trust. Slowly, she began to tell her story. She spoke about her mother's death, Emma's cruelty, the plan she'd overheard to get rid of them. When she finished, there were tears in the eyes of many of the gypsies who had gathered to listen. Amara placed a comforting hand on Afua's shoulder. You are brave, little ones, she said, and you are safe now. You can stay with us for as long as you need. That night, for the first time since leaving Dimbasa, the three sisters slept deeply, lulled by the soft sound of gypsy songs and the warmth of borrowed blankets. The following days were a period of adjustment. The girls learned the customs of the gypsy people, their songs and dances. Afua discovered she had a natural talent for healing, eagerly absorbing the knowledge of herbs and remedies that Amara shared. Adjoa flourished, her cheerful personality finding expression in the vibrant dances of the gypsies. Even little Aqua seemed happier, surrounded by aunts and uncles who constantly doted on her. But Afua never completely let her guard down. Whenever the group approached a new village, she tensed, fearing to see a familiar face or hear rumors about 3 missing girls. Months passed, and the seasons changed. The gypsy group continued their endless journey, taking the girls further and further from Dimbasa. Afua began to wonder if they would ever see their homeland again. One night, while the group was camped near a large city, Amara called Afua for a private conversation. Amara quickly took Afua's hands in hers. "Never, my dear. You will always have a place with us, but I want you to have the chance to choose, to see what else the world has to offer." Afua was silent for a long moment, absorbing Amara's words. Part of her was terrified of leaving the safety of the gypsy group, but another part yearned for knowledge, for challenges, for a chance to do more, to be more. In the days that followed, Afua discussed the idea with her sisters. Adjoa was excited about the possibility of learning new dances, of having a bigger stage for her talent. Akua, though hesitant to leave the only family she knew, was curious about the idea of school. Finally, after much reflection and discussion, the 3 sisters decided to accept the offer. It was a difficult decision, full of tears and promises of frequent visits. On the day of their departure, the entire camp gathered to say goodbye. There were gifts, hugs, and many tears. Amara pulled Afua into a tight embrace. "Remember, my dear," she whispered, "you will always have a home with us. But now it's time for you to build your own path." The girls left for the city, a mixture of fear and excitement in their hearts. The school was a completely new world for them. There were challenges, adapting to sedentary life, dealing with the curiosity and sometimes prejudice of their classmates, learning to navigate a formal education system. But there were also joys. Afua discovered a passion for science and math, dreaming of one day becoming a doctor to help communities like the one she had left behind. Adjoa flourished in art classes, her dance evolving and blending with new styles. Akua, the youngest, absorbed knowledge like a sponge, her natural curiosity finding fertile ground in the school. The years passed, and the sisters grew, learned, and evolved. They kept in touch with the gypsy community, visiting whenever they could during school holidays. But they also began to put down roots in the city, making friends and building a life that was all their own. Afua, now 18, was about to graduate from high school when she received surprising news. A woman from Dimbasa was in the city, looking for them. Afua's initial fear soon turned to shock when she discovered that the woman was actually an aunt she had never met, her mother's sister. The aunt told them that Kwame had died years ago, and that the village had changed a lot since then. There was a new leadership, more progressive, that valued education and women's rights. "Your mother would be so proud of you," the aunt said, tears in her eyes. She always dreamed that her daughters would have opportunities she never had. The words hit Afua like a bolt of lightning. All these years, she had carried the weight of guilt for leaving her mother behind. Knowing that her actions would have made her mother proud was like a balm for her soul. With this new information, the sisters faced a decision. They had built a life in the city, had plans and dreams. But now, the possibility of returning to Dimbasa, not as fugitives, but as educated and empowered women, presented a new opportunity. After much discussion and reflection, they decided to visit Dimbasa after Afua's graduation. Not to stay permanently, but to reconnect with their roots, to understand where they came from, and perhaps, in some way, make a difference in the community they once left behind. The trip back to Dimbasa was a mix of emotions: nostalgia, apprehension, hope. When they arrived at the village, they were received with a mixture of curiosity and admiration. Many remembered them as the scared girls who disappeared years ago. Now, they saw strong, educated, and confident women. Afua visited her mother's grave, finally able to say a proper goodbye. She told her mother about their adventures, their dreams, their achievements, and she promised to honor her memory by continuing to fight for a better future, not just for herself and her sisters, but for all the girls of Dimbasa. During their visit, the sisters shared their experiences and knowledge with the community. Afua talked about health and hygiene. Adjoa taught new forms of expression through dance, and Aqua shared stories of different cultures she had learned about in school. One afternoon, while walking through the village, Afua came across Kwame's old house. She stopped for a moment, looking at the place that had once been her home. Memories flooded back, some painful, some sweet. She thought of her mother, how she used to sing while cooking, how her smile lit up the whole house. A little girl, not much older than Akua when they fled, ran by, laughing joyfully. Afua smiled, thinking about how much things had changed. The children of Dimbasa now seemed freer, happier. When it was time to leave, the sisters didn't feel the same pain as the first time they left Dimbasa. Now, they knew they would always have a place there, not as victims or fugitives, but as daughters of the village who returned stronger and wiser. Back in the city, each followed her own path. Afua entered medical school, determined to one day return and establish a clinic in Dimbasa. Adjoa pursued a career in dance, blending tradition and modernity in her performances. Akua, still young, dreamed of becoming a teacher, inspired by the educators who had changed her life. As they walked their individual paths, the sisters remained united by the unbreakable bond forged in their journey. They never forgot the lessons learned from the gypsies, the importance of family, whether by blood or choice, and the power of education to transform lives. Years later, Afua returned to Dimbasa as the first doctor born in the village. She established a clinic that not only treated diseases but also educated the community about health and wellness. Adjoa traveled the world with her dance company, but always returned to Dimbasa to teach and inspire local children. Aqua became the director of the village school, implementing a curriculum that valued both traditional and modern knowledge. Together, the three sisters became a symbol of hope and change, not only for Dimbasa, but for all the girls in neighboring villages who dreamed of a better future. One quiet afternoon, years after her return, Afua sat in the shade of the large tree in the center of the village. She watched the children play, free and carefree, and smiled. Her gaze wandered to the horizon, where the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and red. She thought of her mother, of Amara, of all the women who had shaped her journey. She thought of the scared girl who once fled this same village and the woman she now was. The journey hadn't been easy, but each step, each challenge, had led her to this moment. Afua closed her eyes, feeling the gentle breeze on her face. She knew that her story, hers and her sisters, would continue to inspire future generations. And as the sun set over Dimbasa, she felt a deep sense of peace and accomplishment. Night fell over the village, but it was no longer a night of fear or uncertainty. It was a night full of possibilities, of dreams waiting to be realized. And at the heart of it all were three sisters who dared to imagine a different future and had the courage to make it a reality. So ends our story, but for Afua, Adjoa, and Aqua, and for all the girls of Dimbasa, it was just the beginning. A new chapter in a story of courage, perseverance, and the transformative power of education and sisterly love. And as the stars began to shine in the night sky over Dimbasa, their light seemed brighter than ever, as if they were smiling down on the village and its three daughters who had found their way back home.